I'm happy you could join us at the SBP podcast, the voice of mobile film. I'm your host, Susie Botello, and you are listening to episode 28. In this episode, we talk with the first place winner of the International Mobile Film Festival in San Diego, Brian Hennings. Brian was in San Diego for the festival, second year in a row, actually, and he took home the award and the trophy. By the way, that trophy, it now has a name. I find it amusing, and he talks about it amongst other things like the point of making films with smartphones and storytelling, and a few other things which you might find inspiring. By the way, Brian is back in Perth now in Australia. So if you're in Australia, hey from San Diego, and congratulations, you were well represented in this year's film festival. The film festival took place on April 28th and 29th in San Diego, and you can get details on the next film festival dates on the website at www.internationalmobilefilmfestival.com. And you should know that we're going to be making an announcement very soon, which will really be good for the mobile film community who wishes to submit films to our film festival. It's a change that will be celebrated by many. And, well, look, as you may know, maybe not, maybe you don't know, maybe you haven't even heard of the film festival yet, but you can go there and take a look at it right now. But our rules have not really changed much at all since our first film festival. But for 2019, okay, well, honestly, I think I'm not going to announce it here. I think what I'm going to do is, well, just stay tuned for the announcement. But I think what I'll do is I'll let our patrons hear about it first. So I'll announce it to our patrons in our Patreon page before we go public with that. And if you want to know how to access our Patreon page, you can go to www.patreon.com/SBP podcast. Okay, so this episode, speaking of Patreon, is going to include a bonus episode for our patrons with Brian. And it's going to be exclusive to you if you're a patron. You're also one of our rock stars and superheroes. So check that out as well, because we're going to discuss cinematography specifically with smartphones. There's going to be some great tips and some great ideas you can put to use right away, probably about as fast as you can pull your phone out of your pocket. If you like our podcast, let us know. We're on Twitter as well. So that's at SBP Podcast. Now, are you ready to join Brian and me? Let's go. We're here with Brian Hennings, who was just here in San Diego, and now you are in Australia again. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Susie. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Well, let's one thing I want to share with our listeners is you are the grand prize. We're just upping your your award. First place. At the International Mobile Film Festival this last month, just basically a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Brian made a really wonderful film. It just, it blew away the judges, and also got a really good reaction actually at the theater at the venue, I should say, from everyone who was watching it, from everyone who came. And so, did you know you were going to win? Or did you have any clue, any hints?
No, gosh, no.
You almost got a stamped ovation there, you know.
I think the reality is that there was such a lot of good competition there that until you said that my film was the one that won, I was still kind of mentally working out which films were still in the running, so it came as a total surprise to win, but a very welcome surprise, and it's certainly very gratifying to have people recognise the work. So yeah, thanks. It was great.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, first of all, I'm really glad that you won. Just to let our listeners know, I'm actually the founder of this film festival, but literally, I have nothing to do with who wins and who doesn't and things like that. I leave that up to the judges. So for me, it was a really nice experience to be able to award Brian, because Brian, you were here last year with another great film as well. And of course, you didn't win, and you still came back. And it was fantastic. But why don't you share a little bit about what your film was with everyone?
Yeah, sure. My film was called Focus, and it kind of looks at the way that people with vision impairment see the world, and the way that the world can see them as well. And it's based on my sister-in-law, who does have vision impairment. She has about 10% vision, and so in my experience with her and some of the challenges that she overcomes on a regular basis, I saw the opportunity to use the smartphone filmmaking as an avenue to kind of give people a little bit of an insight into what that is. So one of those films that's very close to my heart, and that I guess that's partly what makes it so special, that it was received so well in the competition over there.
You know, both films have that very strong. What I always emphasize, and a lot of uh, people who are really into the mobile film making scene or community, we are all emphasizing, and people in Hollywood, everyone knows that it's really about the story. But with a good story, it always leaves this lasting message, and both of your films leave that. Is that a theme for you for every film?
I like certainly, I came into this game as a writer, so to me, story is the most important thing, because as stunning as your visuals might be, without something to tie them all together, you can kind of lose that impact. So, I always want to tell a story. It's kind of, I guess, a coincidence that the two films that I've primarily made with smartphone were ones that were both very personal stories, and had lasting messages. I don't think I set out to go, I'm going to go and make a film with a lasting message. I think that's just a happy outcome of making films that are close to your heart, is that you put so much of yourself, and the story in there, that it works out that other people are affected by it, which, like you said earlier, chatting to people at the festival after the screening, and getting those comments about the way that they perceive the story, and certainly one of the great things for this was being able to marry, with this particular project, was being able to marry the story and the heart of that with the visuals that the smartphone is able to generate. Kind of results in this thing that hopefully kind of sticks with people, and makes them think about things a little bit more than they might otherwise.
Yeah, and I actually, it's a good thing. That's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about a little more with you. Your film at the film festival is now nominated for the Global Mobile Film Awards, which is essentially the online Oscars of mobile film. And this is the second year. And your nomination was for cinematography. because your film has a really great opening sequence. First of all, there is no human being actually that you can see in the film for the most part, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of people that kind of appear, but no one's really identifiable. It
Yeah.
certainly doesn't have a character that is playing it.
But it does
Yeah,
have
so
the narration is the actual protagonist, right, of the story.
that's right.
That's the driving force of this, and you've got this narration uh, taking you, uh, in your own mind, you're visualizing what she's explaining, and what she's feeling, and how she's stating her feelings and expressing that. And visually, you're going from the one scene into the next very seamlessly, almost like magic, right? From one location to the next. And that's done in some pretty, big films. And, it's great cinematography how you're seamlessly going from one location to the other, and how you're able to pull that off. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about what made you decide that was the best way to portray the story in your film.
Yeah, I guess the heart of the story is the narration, and I need to take a moment to acknowledge the brilliant work of Sarah Harris, who did the voiceover for us. Without that performance, I think everything else would have fallen pretty flat. But the idea behind the way that I shot this, it came down to, we're talking about visual impairment, and so you have to present things in a very visual way. Um, and the real idea behind this is that the opening sequence is kind of shot. It's very vibrant. It's very fast moving. It's very free flowing, which is the way that I guess the way that we would normally see the world without vision impairment, and kind of demonstrating the way, and using some trickery to show things, and represent that. But that bit of the film was there to be a contrast to the second part of the film, which is delving more into the actual visual impairment, where we start slowing down the camera movement. We don't cut so seamlessly from one thing to another, and we have degraded vision to show the way that a non-vision impaired person might see something, and then contrasting that with the way that a person with vision impairment might see that same thing. So there's a scene in there where the camera closes in on a mobile phone that starts ringing, but at the stage where it starts ringing, the image is degraded to the extent that you can no longer read what's on the phone. And that, to me, that was just one little example of how things that I take for granted, that when my phone rings I can just glance at it and see who's calling me, is compared to someone who has visual impairment, and they can't necessarily do that same thing.
That's so true. I know phones have settings and things like that, but nothing is that easy still to figure
Oh,
out and to see.
yeah. I mean, there's small examples, and that's a really good way of how people with any kind of impairment adjust to that way. Like someone with visual impairment might, instead of having a picture that pops up that says Susie's calling me, might have a different ringtone for Susie, so that they know from the audio cue that it's Susie. They don't have to see it. but this is that idea that you know, as someone with relatively good vision, I don't necessarily think about all the ways that can be challenging. Things like when I'm at the crosswalk, can I necessarily see that the little person in the sign's gone green, or can I check to see that even though the traffic light's red, that a car hasn't decided to just drive through anyway?
This is I'm sitting here listening to you, and this is the kind of thinking that goes behind someone who's developing a story for film, because it's one thing to say, well, this is this is interesting, maybe I'll write that story or whatever, but now you've got to take that whole concept and put it into audio and a visual to go with
Mm.
that, and moving and transitioning. And that is what that's why you get the award. That's why your film stands out. And I don't mean just you, Brian. For someone who's listening, that's what makes your that's why it's not just about, oh, I got a phone, this is great, I'll do something with this, because I can. um and why I really emphasize that you think about what story you're going to tell and how you're going to tell it, because you can take a story and share it in so many different ways. But as a filmmaker, you're taking these little concepts, right? And now you're thinking, I was thinking about I noticed just a few weeks ago that if I close my eyes, I'll know when my glass is full when I'm filling it with water from the faucet,
Hmm.
because the sound changes. You know, um, even if I'm not holding it and it's getting heavier, there's also something about the sound, the hollowness, and then it that hollow sound goes away. And I'm thinking, if I couldn't see, that would be one way to know my glass is getting fuller. I could almost probably figure out it was half full or near full, and things like that. But to be able to put those things into a story with a visual and the sound, and figure that out, that takes a bit of work and creativity, but it takes skill and talent. And you grew from your film Express into this one. I mean, it really showed. Have you done anything in between those two films, practicing anything?
I was working on a web series last year that was moderately successful. This is kind of the first short that I've shot since I shot Express. So,
Yeah.
been working on the skill set that I needed with different projects. But yeah, and like I just getting back to that whole idea of the story and how you tell it. And I think that to me it comes down to there's so many bits that go into storytelling. Certainly there's the writing and the actual story of it. And, in the example of Focus, the narration and how important that is to the story. But then you come down and you go, well, I could have that narration with just a black screen, and that would
Right.
be and that could be an effective film in itself. Um, but then you kind of also tell a story through the visual representation that you have, and and then like you touched on before, the audio aspect, and the way that you kind of put in music underneath something, or the sound effects and things like that. I mean, you only have to look at horror movies to see how effective sound effects can be in evoking a very real response. Sometimes I wish that in real life we had that, the sort of backing track, so that when something's going to go wrong, you can hear the music change in the background. You go, oh, I need to watch out here. But maybe it's for the best that we don't have that as
Right.
well. So yeah, I think it's interesting seeing how this stuff marries together. And I think sitting down to film Focus, it was something that I really did think about, and like how can I visually represent what we're also talking about in voiceover. So yeah, I think to me it comes down to that idea of you need to marry everything together to get that really affecting story, and make like make people sit up and take notice of it. Hopefully.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could have approached it, a very simple way by saying, okay, I'll get an actor to play someone who's blind, and they're sitting in the park and they can't see, and blah blah blah, and then we'll take her to another scene, and she can be narrating, but it could be the actor. There's just different ways to do it, but I really think it's worth, and any notable filmmaker, not just a mobile filmmaker, will tell you that they spend a lot of time sort of forming a strategy in a way and cultivating how they're going to, as a director, how they're gonna put that vision into a film,
Mm.
from their story. And that's what I've, not to be a critic or anything, but that's what I'm seeing, I'm noticing with you, that, and why I asked you if you had done anything in between, because your Film Express was wonderful, but you can see that there's growth, between that and this one, and your skills and everything to actually do what you did with this film compared to before is much greater. And, to people who were sitting in the audience, that they didn't see the previous film. It was just last year. It was just a hop and a skip away, right?
Yeah.
And then to see this one, right? Like I know there were a few people there that had seen it, seen the other one. But for me, it was like, wow, look at Brian go, you came a ways, and that's fantastic. How far you've come, and that to me shows that as you move forward with this, because we're going to talk about that now, but it's just going up the ladder, you know. And what I wanted to ask you now, I know that you're submitting your film to other film festivals as well,
Yep.
right? So we're not going to be able to show the film to our listeners. We're not just going to put the link there, and you're not going to be able to just see the film. But at some point we will, we'll be
Definitely.
able to
Yeah.
do that. But you've got plans for more mobile films, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's always the next story to tell. And one of the things that I do love about mobile film, um, as an avenue to tell stories, is that you can tell stories with much less resources than you might need, to do a full big production. Like the thing with Focus was, that was essentially just me making that film. So between the shooting it, the editing it, all that kind of stuff. The writing, I took on every part of that, and part of that was challenging myself to go to say, can I do this on my own? So other than the music that we put in there, and Sarah's voiceover, it was that singular person that did that. And
How amazing is that, Brian? Because last year you had a crew, you had a professional crew, right? You had your cinematographer and all that, and this year it was just mainly it was just you, and look how far you've come. I mean, isn't that cool?
oh yeah, and there were two very different projects, and they were set out for different things. And like I said, it was part of the idea behind Focus was exactly how much can I do. without relying on people who are professionals in their individual roles. So it was interesting. I guess like what's coming next. There's a bunch of ideas that are bouncing around in my brain. I want to, like you always want to grow with this, and you always want to challenge yourself, and try to make the next thing bigger and better than the last thing. And certainly winning the award at your festival was, it was a highlight, but it's also now set a bar there as well, which means either if I make a film and enter it in next year's one, either I match what I've done before or I do worse.
Well,
So
and winning doesn't always mean that, I mean, it's like something I was thinking about because, we're talking about, you probably coming again next year, and hopefully that will happen with another film. But it doesn't always mean it's not a failure if you don't win every time, because just like you and I've had these discussions before, just the fact that you get to the film festival, you're sharing your story through film, and then you're having such a great time during the film festival, connecting with people, and then your next film. I mean, if every director who ever received an award would just say, "Well, that's it." I mean, why go, do another one? Because, if I don't win an award, I'm just going to beat myself up. It's like, are you kidding? Look at all the
yeah, you
films.
you're quite right. And I always say when I'm working on a project, I always say the main achievement is finishing the project. Is getting from that initial stage of the kernel of a concept of something to getting a film that is finished and ready to show people. That's the win, is getting to that stage. And then anything beyond that is a bonus. Having being accepted into festivals is a super bonus. Having people watch the film and comment on it is awesome. If you're lucky enough to win an award or two, that's the cream on the cake. But if you get to that stage where you finish a film, and so many times I've seen people that have started the process and not been able to finish it,
Yeah.
just getting to the finishing line is that win. And that's one of the things, again, that I love about smartphone filmmaking, is it makes it so much easier to get from that initial concept to the finishing line. It's by no means easy,
Right.
but
It's a
it
challenge.
certainly
It's
can
still a
be easier.
challenge. Yeah. And
But
that's also the thing about film festivals that are a challenge in themselves. I mean, you could make a mobile film and never put it in a film festival,
yeah,
as well. But
absolutely.
that's part of the challenge for a filmmaker is, aiming for particular film festivals that you want to submit it to, and saying, okay, this is their criteria. This is the challenge. I got to make the film, during this, it's got to be this long or less or more or whatever, right? And it has to be, submitted, finished, completed, exactly to the second, and by this day and hour and
Yeah.
minute, and and so that in itself, and then you've got to go through some hoops as well, because there's other things you have to, other things you have to get through in the process. But that's all part of the. It's like a sport in a way, but for filmmakers, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is some of the films that we saw this year in the festival. And for some of the filmmakers, it was their first time making a film, their first time entering it into a festival or being accepted into a festival.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what they're going to do. Hopefully they're going to put a film together for next year's festival. What are they going to do that moves their craft forward. How are they going to tell their stories? How are they going to show their stories next year? Like someone like Seth, who's 18 and kind of submitted. I'm pretty sure that was his first film. Into a festival, and having a chat to him and seeing what he wants to achieve in the industry. I'm excited to see, can he put something together for next year, and how's that going to evolve from what he had this year? And then, Narelle, who took out third, even though she used an iPhone, is
We're going to have to talk a little bit about that one.
And that was her first film, and that was one that when we were watching through, I was thinking that's such a strong contender. And being a first film, I was like, I'm so excited to see what she's going to do next, and how she's able to move forward. And I'm I'm surprised that I won with the caliber of something like Norel's film there, and some of the others that we saw. And I'm keen to see what they're going to present next year. Hopefully, if they are able to come back.
Yeah. You were talking about Seth. He really amused me. I just really want to see what he comes up with next, because you could see that he was inspired by the whole experience. I'll never forget the whole when I asked that question during the Q&A about what would Steven Spielberg, what would you say to Steven Spielberg or whatever, and he said, "Watch me."
Yeah. Yeah.
And Norelle, yeah, you're right, and you were surprised, but she was just, well, I kind of played this a little bit tricky with her. uh, I knew I could get away with it too, but I really surprised her. Just the way that I announced it. But she truly was surprised that she took the award as well. And between you and her, this probably might be a little good time. What do you think to talk about the little battle, the battle of the phones?
Yeah, I'm going to preface this with, that Narelle and I kind of needle each other over which phones are best. I'm firmly in the Samsung camp. I use a Samsung to shoot my films, and she's firmly in the iPhone camp. And I'm not sure whether this is just an Australian thing or whether it's a global thing, but we have what we call here banter, where it's basically we'll kind of lovingly mock each other.
Yeah. Well,
So
I
sometimes
loved it. I loved it from the start. Of course, I didn't get enough of that until we were doing that roundtable podcast where it really came out. And that was a lot of fun. But yeah, go ahead, continue. I just had to tell you how much I love it.
I think it's sometimes it can come across as something that it's not, but essentially it's just us having a bit of fun talking about it. The reality is I love using Samsung phones. They worked really well for me. We chose initially to go with a Samsung after running a bunch of comparison tests between the different makes and models of phone, and for us, the Samsung worked better for what we were trying to
You used
film at
it
that
last
stage.
year too, didn't you?
That's right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for us at that time, using that generation of phone, the Samsung was it handled low light conditions better than we could get the iPhone to do it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I think I said it at the festival. The best phone to use to film something is the phone that you have access to.
That's kind of the driving force between smartphone filmmaking, is not that this phone is better than the other or this camera is better than a phone or anything like that. It really ends up being that well, that's what everybody has. So why not? Let's all connect
Yeah,
and share stories with it and do our best,
yeah.
with what we've got.
I mean, you look at it, and Jason presented his film that was shot on an old Nokia
Right?
phone, and I'm so glad that that wasn't in competition, because that would have blown me out of the water. But like the fact that I think he said it was like a 720p or worse, 240p it might have been.
Mm.
Camera, but 10 years ago he was able to use that to make a very effective story, and again, that idea of having a story that he wanted to relate, and using the visual aspect of the phone to support that story, um, means that you don't need the latest generation iPhone or Samsung or a Google or whatever. It's whatever you have access to, as long as you're smart about using it, and as long as you're marrying that idea of a film is a story. If you try to use something that only shoots in 240p, and you're trying to make the latest blockbuster Marvel film, it's
Oh, well, if
probably
you're
not
going to
going to
do
work too
that, you
well.
might as well just pull out the iPhone X, though, right? Wink, wink.
No, I wouldn't, but like I'd probably go the Samsung 9, but nah, that'd be me. Um, but yeah, I think it's good to have that playfulness, and I think we touched on it at the festival as well, where the idea of having these competing brands pushes the technology forward, where I know that when iPhone bring out their latest, greatest version of the phone, the iPhone, um, Samsung's going to have already been looking at what they're doing, and thinking about how do they take it to the next level again, and at the same time, Google's sitting there with their phones going, well, what
Yeah.
can we do?
Well,
Um,
when I was teaching the workshops a couple years ago, and I remember there was someone there who had a Windows phone. And those are uncommon, right? It's always
yep.
Android or iOS, and someone there had a Windows phone. And I said, "Oh, well, I haven't encountered that yet. Let's open it up. Let's check it out." And you know what? It's got a camera just like any other phone,
Yeah.
and the girl that was using it was making videos, and it didn't matter. It's all about that. It would be kind of cool if both Apple and Samsung got in touch with me and said, you know what, Susie, for your next film festival, we want you to have a competition aside from the regular one for Samsung and one for iPhone. And we'll help you get that, we'll advertise it for you and tell people to submit. Let's see who wins. They wanted to be a part of that fun, challenge
Yeah.
competition,
I,
and I
I think
bet you
it's
at different times either one would win. Wouldn't even,
sure.
but it would be a
Yeah.
push.
I mean, you look at it, and the whole idea of being able to make films like I use the term like film rather than videos,
Right.
using a smartphone, is something that I think that they're starting to get behind. I mean, we've had some big releases that have been filmed on iPhones, or smartphones in general. But I think you're starting to see that idea where the brands are supporting the filmmaking aspect a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think they've probably been a little bit guilty in the past of um, looking at the visuals of it, which is good for their marketing point of view. Like you watch a Samsung ad that looks at the video making side of it, and it's all like, hey, we're going to show you super slow mo skateboarders and stuff like that, which is their marketing game. They have to do that. But
Right.
I totally agree that it would
Well,
be great if
that's more what the consumer, the average consumer is using it for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And now on my end, my vision is that the average consumer goes beyond that. That everybody who has a phone with the camera, when I first started this, just to bring this up, um, I had a lot of, I wouldn't say naysayers, but I would say people that were like, oh, come on, making a film festival, with phones, and you're just going to get birthday parties and all kinds of little dumb videos, basically. I mean, I'm quoting here.
Mm,
And you're going to get all that junk, quote unquote, that you see on YouTube. And I said, wow, why would you think that? It's a film festival. It's not a video. It's not a phone video festival. It's a film festival for footage caught, for movies shot with phones, and that word film is just like you said, that makes all the difference in the world in the perception. And I didn't get that. I just did not get that. The first three film festivals, I never once got anything that was even resembling, you know, a video without a story.
mm.
They were more geared towards film.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it is that as much as hey, I use my phone to take videos of the average lifestyle videos of kids running around or birthday parties or whatever.
It's always
Um,
important too to get that stuff. I mean, on a personal
sure,
level, of course. And it's also good to know that you can do that with the same camera that you can actually make a film with.
that's
That's the
that's right.
magic.
And then there's like it becomes once you're used to using your phone to videotape take video of things,
Yeah.
it's then a much smaller leap to go, well, I'm going to use this same tool to tell a story that's important to me. And we saw a couple of films in at the festival where Pamela's film that was highlighting Alzheimer's and the effect that has on people.
Yeah.
Like having the situation where someone who may not necessarily know much about the film industry at all can go, I want to tell this story of something that's happened in my life. You know, we saw Adrian, who unfortunately didn't make it to the festival, but
Right.
his story about someone's physical challenges after an ailment and things like that. And it's something that I guess as I'm getting older and I'm starting to become less focused on my own life and more focused on the things that are going on around me. You kind of notice that there's stories everywhere. I kind of mockingly said a long time ago that, well, I don't really want to work in documentaries. I like making, writing stories and telling, these things. And as I'm getting older, I'm starting to look at things and going, so there's some really great stories around that we can tap into. And that idea of through festivals like yours and through movements like the Film Breaker movement, saying to people that you can use these tools that a lot of people have access to capture a story and present that in a way that you possibly couldn't have even say 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it, like during our film festival, like when we had the workshop, with everyone sharing tips and things like that, and how they made their film and what they would suggest and things like that. And people want to hear about the gear, and so you have to show them something. You have to talk about that, because that's the interest when you're talking about filmmaking per se. But like when I teach a workshop, it's about, I've even said it, like when I was at Comic-Con and I said, Google is your friend. And they looked at me like, what? And I said, look, there are thousands of video tutorials and thousands of articles with photos, and there are hundreds of different kinds of microphones and gimbals and many apps and what have you for filmmaking using your smartphone. But what you can't find out, or what you need to look inside for, is you and who you are as a person, as a human being who's lived on the earth for however long you've been here, and you're connected to everything around you. So what can you pull from that to turn into a story, regardless of the gear that you're using, by
Yeah,
using that phone?
I think, it's one of those things where, it's kind of like when you go into the professional side of filmmaking, the big budget side of filmmaking, where it's like, we've got this camera and we've got this rig and things like that. And, we suffer from that in the smartphone world as well.
Yeah.
But there's so much, there's so many things out there. Like I know Jason was talking about the hacks that he came up with, and like you can buy a $200 lighting kit, or you can buy a $9 torch and be able to hack that and get very much the same lighting capability out of it.
Yeah.
I know I made a rig out of some PVC piping that allowed me to hook up the smartphone to it, my audio recording equipment, and be able to run around without being tethered to anything, and get relatively stable footage out of it just from doing that. And that was like maybe $10 worth of equipment that I used to make that, or I could spend $200 on a gimbal,
Right.
that smooths it out as well. I know which one I prefer using, but I also know which one I used first, and I'm not sure that looking at the footage between the two types of stabilization, that an average person would be able to tell the difference. So,
well, yeah, and when you're behind the camera, when you're using all these things to film, I mean, when people go to the theater to see a movie, yeah, there may be, a sideshow of the making of this movie or something, you know what I'm saying? But people go there, they get absorbed into the world of the film, right? And
yeah.
they're not paying attention. I wonder if they shot that with Steadicam. I wonder what lights they used for that. And, I wonder, they're not even thinking about that. They're in that moment, which is exactly what you want as a filmmaker. But yeah, I've worked in film sets where, yeah, everybody, hubbles, around the camera and the DP guy, and oh, what have you got there? What's that? A very zoom? What does that do? And ooh, stuff like that. And it's like toys, it really
Yeah.
is. But they're tools, guys, girls too, that are into fixing cars, and they pull out the box of tools, and they're like, yeah, give me the lug wrench, and you're like, what that is, it's like, oh, I'm such a pro, things like that.
Mm.
But who cares? I I've known people to argue over, skill saw brands and things like that. It's all the same. It really, they're just tools. But remember, we were sharing the story about our friend in Cameroon in Africa. This is years ago, when I told him, I said, well, look, okay, so you don't have a store to buy a gimbal. But what about, you got some junk cars out there, you can snag a steering wheel and mount your phone on it and use that. And he did. And he sent us photos. He also made a tripod out of bamboo. is and his films came out. He used Adobe Premiere to in a BlackBerry, what he had,
Mm.
and then these things, and he made his film, and he had actually taken some courses somehow, and so he got the gist of filmmaking. He just didn't have access to the tools, and so he went that route. But all in all, Brian, it's that what you did. You put your like I said, last year you had a crew working with you, and you had the tripod and and all that. This year is just you. You got a gimbal or whatever, but it was mainly you. You got your narrator, and you did the editing. Um, you did the whole thing, and you took that wonderful prize home. And how's the trophy doing?
The trophy that we've dubbed the Susie, and I'm hoping that sticks from now on. That every year it's now the Susie. The trophy's doing quite well. It's sitting on a shelf next to me just at the moment. Where I saw this morning that Narelle has risen to the challenge and taken the her trophy around, I think it was Cronulla
Yeah.
over on the east coast. So I now have to rise to that challenge and do a little bit of a tour of the west coast with the Susie as we because I can't let her have the final say. I need to. I need to get in there. People who follow me on Facebook would have seen that it enjoyed the ride up the coast from San Diego up to California in the hire car, and then enjoyed a nice meal out at In-N-Out Burger. So it's got a lot of miles on it now. It's still looking pretty good. And like I said, a little bit later today we're going to take it out and see what shenanigans we can get up to.
I I grew up in different parts of the world. I mean, I traveled between Spain. I lived in Italy. I lived here in San Diego. Went to Georgia. And the funny thing is that I was looking at that trophy. I handed it to you and to Norel, and then now it's over on the other side of the world. But it's so much fun to see this game, this awesome game. I'm just I don't even know what to call it. I mean, quite honestly, between the two of you with the trophy is like an entity, you know. And there it is with you. Reminds me of the commercial where the dad is taking the little doll. He has to make a business trip, and he takes the little doll, halfway around the world, and he's doing FaceTime or something with the little girl, showing the doll. Oh, she's here having lunch in Paris or something, with me. But that's pretty cool to do that, and I think everything happens for a reason, Brian. I think it's really a lot of fun what you and Norel are both doing, not just with the trophy and not just with Samsung and the iPhone, but with making films, being able to connect in the way that you did. You didn't meet each other. You're both from Australia, and you didn't meet before, did you?
No, no. Well, I mean, there is like a whole lot of country between where where we are. I'm on the west coast and she's on the east coast. Yeah, no. The first time we met was at the meet and greet.
Wow.
Kind of like, oh, you're an Aussie, I'm an Aussie. Hey, we must be friends.
Yeah, and that
But
happened too with Jason Van Genderen from Filmbreaker,
yep,
who I remember him saying something. I don't know if he was saying it to you or to Norel or maybe to both of you, that have to come all the way out to San Diego to meet Australians in the
yeah.
mobile filmmaking.
It's a funny world that we live in, that you travel 20 odd hours on a plane just to meet someone that you could have jumped on a 4 hour flight and met. But that's part of the wonderful thing of it, is we get people from all over the place coming in to tell their stories, to share their experiences. it'd be great to have a situation. I know we've kind of talked about it before, where it's like, well, how do we link up and get projects that we might work on together, and things like that. And with mobile phone, there's always that possibility that you could shoot part of a film, in Perth, in Western Australia. You could shoot part of it in San Diego. You could shoot part of it up in Toronto, and edit it all together and make a seamless story.
Yeah,
So
you're going to go to Toronto, aren't you, for that film festival there?
yeah, yeah. We got selected in this year. So haven't been to Toronto for many years. So it'll be good to get back over there. I've got a few friends that I've made through attending various festivals that live up that way of the world. So
Well, doesn't
um,
Ari Taros from last year's film festival live over there?
yeah, yep. So I've been in touch with him, and hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up if he happens to be in town at that time. And it'd be great to renew acquaintances, and hopefully make more smartphone filmmaking
Yeah,
friends up there.
and there's also Mithran Maharajan, who made the feature film last year, Figment,
Yeah, yeah,
and I
and that was
believe,
that's a great film too. Yeah, he's up
yeah.
that way, and so yeah, it's going to be exciting to be there. I'm not sure that I'm excited about the long flight to get there again so soon after doing it. But this is exciting, exciting times, to be in the smartphone filmmaking world. And as much as I love doing this, part of what I see my mission here is to encourage others to get into the scene as well. So
I
um,
honestly, Brian, I've it started really, it's always been something that's been building, but I think this year, with you coming back and connecting with, you're such an easy person to get along with. Socially, you're a lot of fun. You have a great sense of humor. Your attitude is great. This whole thing with the iPhone versus Samsung, with you and Norel, it really is, it's really just, it's like you said, it's banter, it's fun. It's a fun thing to do, but it just seems so much more evident, for me, that it's more than a community. It's like family. It's like the mobile film family or something. you know, coming together.
I I think it's the wonderful thing of being involved in a festival like yours is that while there's a competition element to it, it's not overly competitive.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that celebration of the stories that we're all telling, the films that we're making. And like certainly last year it was about, for me, it's like I didn't win anything that year, but recognizing the quality of the films that did win, and aspiring to kind of achieve that level of quality in my own films. And having that community of people around that can support, and after last year's festival, keeping in touch with people, already been in touch with people after this year's festival, been sending messages to people going, so what was that app that you said you were using again? And things like that.
Yeah, because last year
It's
you had was last year. I'm trying to remember, because I know I was talking to Chuck Copeland on our thing, and he said this was the first film festival experience, outside of sweeping red carpets, that he had had. And but did you say that last year, this was the first film festival or something, or was the first film,
yeah.
or?
It was the first film festival that any of my films had ever been accepted into.
Oh, wow.
And it was also the first film festival that I attended. So it's there's always going to be a special place in my heart for your festival. And that whole idea that you know I, I can be half a world away, make a film for very little money, with some good people involved in it, and wind up in a festival in San Diego. It kind of blew my mind last year to turn up and go like, wow, this is a real thing. Great, okay.
Right. Well, also,
And
had you spent hundreds of thousands of dollars making your film, it would have been harder to make that flight and come on out, right?
oh yeah, yeah. I'm never gonna, if someone comes along and says they want to give me hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a film, I'm never going to say no. But that's just in case there's any financiers out there that are listening to the podcast,
Like
give me a call.
Samsung, you know.
Samsung is a great brand. I'm just sucking up to them a lot now.
Well, they've helped
You
you
know,
with two films already,
yeah,
and you won a prize for this one, and the fact that you're standing up for them, to the level that we're used to seeing, and I think this is something that's really interesting, because I think I said it, to you before, that how interesting is it that there are a lot of great films and music videos and things like that that are made with Samsung, but they don't get the attention of the media like the iPhones,
yeah,
and the Apple stuff does. And I think that, when you get a filmmaker that wins, from a Samsung, and to really stand out and say, look, it was a Samsung, and Samsung's rule, and that kind of stuff that you're used to hearing from iPhones. I mean, Samsung should take advantage of that, and say, hey, we've
yeah.
got somebody rooting for us in this community. We need to take advantage of them and give Brian $100,000.
I'm sure they've got the checkbook ready. No, I do think it's an element where it would be great to have brands like Samsung wade into this field more, and be more vocal about the way that their products can be used. I think in my experience, Samsung's got a great product that I'm very happy to use. I'm very happy to talk to people about using a Samsung as opposed to using any other brand. But it really does. It comes down to the brands stepping up to promote what's going on, what people
Yeah.
are doing with their products. And I think it'll be interesting, to see what the next generation of phones are going to bring when they're released. Seeing some quite exciting chatter about what the Samsung X is going to be, although that's still a little ways away. But you don't have to look very far back to see how far that we've come with this technology. And I think the next generations are going to be that step ahead again. And I really hope that companies like Samsung start engaging with the filmmaking community to find out what we want.
Yeah.
What type of things we would make us be able to tell even better, more engaging stories, and to support the filmmakers that are coming through with this, through whether that be through direct support to filmmakers by writing checks or things like that, or whether it's through supporting festivals like yours and saying, we're going to have a prize for the best film that was made with a Samsung, or
Right.
we're going to have some kind of challenge, and that whether that's through phone brands. I know that we've got a lot of support through with some of the software makers and some of the equipment makers, that we like being able to expand on that and encourage more people to get into this and encourage that rivalry between different brands. So that we have people like Narelle saying, I'm an iPhone champion, and have people like myself where it's like, no, Samsung all the way. The more we have of that, the better it is for both the brands themselves
Well, yeah, because
and for the industry.
The next part of that conversation that comes in is like, well, why? What, tell me about what makes yours better than mine. And that's the productive part of it that I think the phone manufacturers want in on, so they can figure out how to make theirs better than the next one so they can do the same thing.
Absolutely. I think the more they pay attention to this world, the better it is, both for the brand and the consumer.
Yeah, definitely. Hey Brian, we're running into an hour, and I know that we're gonna do our Patreon tips for patrons, so I don't want to wear you out. The day's just getting started out there, where you are. So I wanted to do a quick. We played the 20-second challenge, since we're all on challenges today, and there might be a few people that you might want to thank. Are you up for that game, real quick?
Let's go.
It'll
Yep,
only
all good.
take 20 seconds. So maybe during the shout out game, that you could give, just people that you want to have, probably people that have been supporting you all along, you know, as you grow with this. Man, the it's there are a lot of firsts in this film festival, because it just dawned on me, Norel was saying this is the first award I've ever received, uh you're being the first experience, Chuck, the first film festival experience as well. That's pretty amazing. I don't know why, I just had to say that. That's just like blowing me away. Um so so okay, let's do the shout out game. Ready,
Mm-hmm.
set, and go.
Okay. The only person that I'm going to shout out this time around is you, Susie, because I think that what you do for this industry is great, and I really want to acknowledge that within the 20 seconds that I have, which should be just about now.
You're cheating.
Well, like,
Oh, cancel. Cancel. Sorry about that, guys.
that's I guess the thing for me is that I've been lucky enough to be on the podcast a couple of times. I've done the shout out game a couple of times as well, so I've kind of hit a lot of people in the other two episodes, which I'm sure you'll link to when you publish this. But yeah, the reality is that the work that you do, Susie, for this industry is amazing. I think everybody that entered into the festival owes you a deep gratitude, because you have moved this industry so far forward with every year that you've had the festival, with everything that you do to encourage the filmmaking side of using smartphones. That I just wanted to take the time to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you, Brian, but you've already won.
I'm working on next year now.
No, it does mean a lot to me that you say that. I really appreciate that. And actually the feeling is mutual. It's I really appreciate people like you who are willing to trust your films in our film festival. And I know that everybody can't come out. There are reasons why. It's not that everybody who entered the film festival didn't want to come. I know there were people who just couldn't come, but I appreciate every single person. And for the people that do somehow get to come to San Diego, I try to make it as I try to show it more, in person, because that's an advantage, as to doing it online or from a phone or something. So I really thank you for being a part of this year's film festival again. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again next year. We're already planning it, around you. No. But yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Brian.
More than welcome. And the reality is, like, yes, not everyone can make it to the festival. Depending on where you live, it can get quite expensive, and as well as having other commitments and work and things like that. But I really encourage, like, the first thing that I encourage of people is that if you in any way think that you might possibly want to make a smartphone film, and let's face it, you're listening to a smartphone filmmaking podcast, you're probably
Right.
already thinking that. If you're thinking about it, just get on and do it. Start working on it. If you're lucky enough to get into the festival and you can at all make it along, and you can make it to one festival, make it Susie's festival, because you'll have such a great time, and Susie looks after people so well. It'll be a great experience. It's going to be something that you'll remember forever, and who knows, you might wind up winning one of the coveted Susie Awards.
That's right, huh? I just think that's so amusing to me.
I told you I'm going to try and make it stick, so we'll keep working on
The Susie. I've been called many things. Oh
it.
gosh. Well, thank you, listeners, and also to if any of the filmmakers that submitted this year, that whether you were or were not able to come, and you're listening to this, some of you went to Film Freeway and wrote reviews, and you as well, Brian. And I just want to say thank you for doing that. That always helps, right? Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the least that I could do in return for the great experience that you've given me over the last couple of years.
Well, thank you. All right, we're going to go to our Patreon page. That's over at patreon.com/SBP podcast. And become a patron, become a friend, even though you're already a friend. But just subscribe to our Patreon page so that you can listen to this bonus exclusive episode with Brian.
Sounds good.